I had not seen until now a longer article or an interview, or maybe almost any interviews with Greta Thunberg about what went down when she was kidnapped, black bagged by Israel in international waters. And this article now is out. It's been out for a little while, but I'm just now getting to covering it. Unfortunately, a lot been in the news. But it's on a Swedish site, a well-known Swedish, one of the biggest Swedish newspapers or magazines called Aftonbladet. But you can get the English version. I highly recommend you read the whole article. It is extensive. Greta has largely refused, and as she says in the article, tried very hard to make this story not about her. And she, even in her first speaking to cameras when she was released, she did not relay what had happened to her. She just said, "This isn't about me." She might have used the word, she might have said treated poorly, but she didn't reveal the details. Now we have a lot of the details, such as them beating her. They forced her and many others to lay on the ground with their face on the ground. And if they picked up their head to look around or to ask for something, they would be kicked and beaten. And so she said she was kicked and beaten many times. I think the reason they prefer like kicking over top of clothes instead of punch to the face is because they assume it's not going to cause quite as much bruising, and therefore there'll be less evidence of it. You can see a photo here of her luggage, which Israel obviously took all the luggage when they kidnapped them in international waters. And while they had her luggage, they took anything they wanted to out of the luggage. While they had her luggage, they wrote across it, "Whore Greta," because not only are these genocidal maniacs, they're also fucking children. You can see that her luggage still says "Whore Greta." Apparently, she said that apparently they constantly called her little whore in Swedish. They put her in. They gave her a quote unquote special treatment, treating her poorer than the rest. It seems like the worst torture, and it was torture. A lot of it is definitely torture. The worst torture aspects were, at one point they put a bunch of them in a cell. There were so many in the little cell that they couldn't sit down, which you can only stand for a certain amount of time before it becomes almost impossible. People start passing out, and there was no room to sleep or anything. And sometimes when they'd fall asleep, somehow someone would come by, and one of the soldiers would come by and scream to make sure they were always awake. So sleep deprivation, another form of torture. Along with that, the biggest form of torture was not giving them any water. And so after several days, it becomes truly life and death to not have any water. And they were begging for water. And the guards would come by drinking bottles of water and then throw half of it away in the garbage just to show to them that they didn't care and weren't giving them water. And also, a lot of the article points out that the people who were from countries with ambassadors in Israel, with officials in Israel, many of them came to see their citizens. Greta is a citizen of Sweden. So Swedish officials did come to see Greta, and they did nothing for her. Absolutely nothing. And she and others were literally begging them, at least get us water. Like, at least, because if Swedish officials, they don't have a lot of power, but they have enough to say, look, it's torture to not give people water. Can you give them a bottle of water? They did fucking nothing. And in this article, you hear from other Swedish officials to say, well, they chose to go there, meaning they chose to go to international waters. They were not in Israeli waters. They were in international waters and when they were arrested, kidnapped. Anyway, I recommend you read the whole article if you want the details of the rest of the torture that was done to Greta Thunberg and the others. Really is insane. And and the other thing was Ben Gvir came in and saw and has bragged about torturing them. Basically, what happened was when Greta and the others made their first trip to Israel, they were trying to get to Gaza, but they were kidnapped. Israel treated them fairly well by Israeli standards and then released them. Apparently, that upset a lot of Israelis, a lot of the Israeli government, that these people were not tortured. It was very upsetting that you could have people trying to bring aid to Gaza and not torture them. And so when they came back, Greta and the others, it was kind of Israel, like the Israeli government going, look, we'll torture them this time, and we'll prove how great it is that we tortured them. He visited the prison and said afterwards that he had given the orders for the flotilla members to be treated in such a way that they would never want to return. He gave the order to torture them, and he's bragged about this. So again, there's a war case, there's a war crimes and genocide case against Israel in front of the International Criminal Court, and these statements, like his saying he gave the order, are really important in these courts if there were to come a time that these people actually get arrested. And sometimes that happens. I don't think the Nazi guards thought they were going to be on the Nuremberg trial either, did they? Look at what happened. So these statements are useful. I think it's important to think of how brave this was for these people to go. I think it did bring a lot of international attention to this cause. I think it's noble of Greta to repeatedly, over and over, say this isn't about her. Even in this article where she gave some of the details, she said it wasn't about her. She was still vague on some of the details. Other prisoners have said, I think every prisoner was forced, every victim was forced to take off all their clothes at some point and maybe put on, prison clothes and stuff. Greta specifically, I think they apparently took a ton of photos of. Probably they're, both to humiliate her and they're maybe hoping to use as some form of blackmail going forward. She has worked actually quite hard to make this story not about her. The truth is that when the story's about her, it does get global attention, and in that way it's useful. So I'm not saying she should jump out of the moment she lands at the airport in Sweden, go running out and go, "Can you believe what they did to me?" I'm not saying that, but I think that the story about her gets a lot of attention, and there's a lot of importance to that because it shows how horrific Israel is, how they act with impunity, how they're willing to do this despite the world's eyes on them. And so that's why it seems important to me.